Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Josh Henning filling in for Mike Gill here on a Monday edition of Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Well, the Eagles have signed a wide receiver. It just might not be who everybody wanted them to sign. But it is probably who the head coach wanted. Zach Pascal is an Eagle. And I think it's pretty simple. We know why he is. But is that enough? Have the Eagles done enough this offseason? I say not. We'll ask Geoff Mosher, co-host of the Inside the Birds podcast, coverage of the Eagles all year long over at InsideTheBirds.com. Geoff, how you doing this Monday?
I'm good, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing well. But as I said earlier in the show before you came on, I wanted to ask you, to me, Howie Roseman, he's known for being active. He's known for being a wheeler and a dealer and a contract negotiator and all these kind of things. But I got to say, between Hassan Reddick and Zach Pascal now, it kind of feels like Howie's been relaxing a little bit here.
Well, I would say as far as free agency, Josh, if you look at Howie less throughout the course of his career and more since, he came back from banishment, if you will, in 2016, he has not been a very high profile free agent spender from Doug Peterson's first year on. And that's good, by the way, because he talked about all the mistakes earlier in his career on getting big names and overpaying for older free agents just because they had made some Pro Bowls. And he has talked plenty about free agency being like speed dating. You don't really know who and what you're getting sometimes. You're just bidding a lot of money. So if you look at some of the free agents that Howie has signed over the last 5 or 6 years, they tend to be younger guys on a second contract. These are long-term deals he's given up. Guys on a second contract who can kind of grow and develop with the core, or he targets veterans on 1-year deals to fill immediate holes using the draft to then address those holes for future talent. Like most of his signings, Javon Hargrave is an example. Rodney McLeod's an example. Malcolm Jenkins is an example. I mean, some of his best signings in free agency have been under this alternative or I'd say modified philosophy when it comes to free agency. So what he's done so far, Hassan Reddick, has pretty much been in line with what he's been doing. And he did make a run at some of the other guys, Marcus Williams, who would have been another young second contract type guy. We were told that he was in on Allen Robinson, just not at that price. So, yeah, you're right that he hasn't done a lot, but I'm not sort of surprised by what you're seeing right now. And then I think the bigger point is that a lot of Howie's best signings, those 1-year type veteran signings that have really come through, have been done after the draft when you still have a hole you need to fill, whether it's, LeGarrette Blount or Chris Long was one. I don't know if that was after the draft, but you get what I'm saying. It's not like the first 2 weeks of free agency type signings.
So let's get into Pascal. Obviously, that just came down about 30 minutes ago. 1-year deal, but this feels like basically, hey, Nick Sirianni worked with him. He knows Sirianni. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of reaching going on here.
No, not only does he know him and have familiarity with him, he's a big fan of Zach Pascal, of his character, of his ability to, do what's asked, of his coachability. And, he's coming here to play a certain role. He's going to be a backup receiver / slot wide receiver, when they're in their 3 wide receiver formations. He's a good route runner. He's tough. I mean, he gives you kind of some of the things that you haven't seen enough from the Eagles, toughness over the middle, catch everything. The veteran savvy that I feel like they didn't have last year, and they should have probably looked into at the beginning of last year.
Should the Eagles consider bringing in another former Sirianni guy in on a prove-it deal, like maybe like a T.Y. Hilton on maybe get another body in the room for camp?
At this point, Josh, I don't know how much more I want to spend financially on a wide receiver unless that wide receiver is going to come in here and be a dominant starter, because I don't know that you need now that you've got Zach Pascal in here, I don't know that you need another guy just to have another guy. I would think if you still want to address your wide receiver core, this is a very deep wide receiver draft, which doesn't mean it's like it's a good draft for wide receivers. It may not be like the one from 2014 that had Beckham and Watkins and all those guys, Brandon Cooks, and it's not known for such supreme talent, but it is this draft. Many people we've spoken to have said you're going to get NFL caliber talent well into round 2, 3, and 4. So at that point, and I know the Eagles have struggled there, but I still would take my chances with trying to get somebody in the draft with all the picks that I have.
Football at 4, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, at Geoff Mosher NFL on Twitter. Now, Jeff, we just saw today that Matt Ryan is going to the AFC. There's a migration. Everyone's going to the AFC. Almost nobody's coming to the NFC now. And I asked the question earlier to the audience. The audience kind of gave me a mixed reaction when I said this. I said, there's 3 teams in the NFC now. It's in no particular order. It's the Packers, the Bucks, and the Rams. Everybody else is seriously flawed. Cowboys roster got worse. I guess Washington got marginally better because they got Wentz. The Cardinals, a lot of questions. I don't know what's going on in San Francisco, honestly. I mean, Jimmy G is still there. I'm surprised he hasn't been traded. So, what happens with the Eagles now? Is there a possibility the Eagles could maybe move up in the hierarchy of teams, considering literally the entire world is basically running to the AFC?
Well, the issue I sort of take with your question, counselor, is that we're making some across the board statements about teams like the Cowboys got worse, as if there isn't still free agency left and the draft left.
Fair.
Yes, did they lose Amari Cooper? Correct. Did they lose Lyle Collins? Correct. Do they have the ability to sign Zadarius Smith tomorrow and maybe another offensive lineman and draft a guy? Yeah, they again, free agency still goes, and some of the best signings are the ones that are done after the first 3 weeks. So, but to your point, you're right that the NFC has lost some sizzle here. I think those 3 teams you named are pretty accurate to say that those are going to be 3 pretty good teams. I still think the Cowboys will be pretty decent. I think they'll do what they need to do. And so, yeah, it does open up the door for a team like the Eagles or anybody else to kind of feel like they can compete. But maybe it also opens up the door for a team that's not very good to finish with like a 4 seed, and you think they're great and they're not. You know what I'm saying? You can kind of get duped in general. I mean, I think as you just sit here today, though, and you talk about the Eagles' ability to compete, they're a little bit better than they were because they signed Hassan Reddick and Zach Pascal. I don't think that they're markedly better. They've improved in an area that they needed to improve in with the pass rush, but every single team, not every team, but 80% of the teams that we discuss sign people in free agency. Every team that we discussed tried to get better. So it's really about how your 53 compares to the 53 the week that you're playing that team.
When it comes to this organization moving forward, this offseason, should we expect more moves, or do you think that the next thing to really focus on should be the draft? Because 3 first-round picks is still 3 first-round picks.
I would say that I think whenever things are quiet around the Eagles, my radar is always up, and things have been very, very quiet, and they still are, even with the Zach Pascal signing. So I think Howie Roseman understands that his team had a lot of holes going into this offseason, and to really, really be Super Bowl competitive, it's going to take more than just one move. So, and he obviously tried to make others that were going to be bigger splashes, whether it was Calvin Ridley, Marcus Williams, Allen Robinson. So clearly, just knowing that, we have to expect that Howie is not trying to leave a stone unturned here and having conversations with teams that may have guys that they're not going to extend after this year and want a deal, things like that. But that doesn't mean the deal is going to get done. So I think Howie will continue to try and look for ways to upgrade the team. Will it happen? We'll see. It hasn't so far, other than Hassan Reddick, really. And we'll see what happens at the draft. And by the way, I'm sorry, even after the draft, if you remember in 2017, one of their biggest acquisitions came during training camp when they acquired Ronald Darby for a third rounder in Jordan Matthews. So that's the one thing with Howie. You know that he's constantly he says this more than anyone. The offseason isn't the first week of free agency. It's free agency. It's the draft. It's after the draft, and it's all the way up to that final cut down day in training camp when he's scouring the waiver for guys who got released.
Well, also LeGarrette Blount, I believe, was signed in May of that year too. So I'm partially remember that because I think it was near my birthday. So that's the reason why I remember that. But,
all right, I'll have to write that down. May 1st, reminder to wish Josh at some point a happy birthday.
At some point. Whether you're early or late, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. Well, I figure if I pick like May 10th, I can't be too far past the date or not too far ahead of it. So.
Oh, my goodness. While I have you, one of the things I want to ask you about is now this is purely speculative reporting that's out there. So nothing against the guys who are putting this out there, but I know it's not like Schefter and there's no like hard reporting on this. But it has been insinuated by some people who cover the Eagles that the reason why Deshaun Watson didn't want to come to the Eagles is because he's friendly with Jalen Hurts because they both have the same QB coach, and that Watson didn't want to unseat him from a job that he thought should belong to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's I've seen it reported, and it is something both Adam Kaplan and I had heard throughout the process, more so over the last few weeks from talking to various people. It wasn't something that's easily I mean, only Deshaun can really answer that, right? But that is something that was kind of the word around the situation, because it was hard to kind of figure out why certain teams got a seat at the table. For example, Cleveland, where he went. It's like the initial word, I want to go somewhere warm, somewhere, better climate. Well, Cleveland doesn't satisfy that at all. Or I want to go to a place where I can win. Well, the Falcons don't look like a team that can win right now, so it would be like, what would rule Philadelphia out if those teams were in? So yeah, that is something that when I saw those reports today, I said, well, that does jibe with what we were both hearing in the last few weeks leading up to it. I feel like that's look, everybody has a right to feel the way they want to feel, but it's a little bit myopic also, in my opinion, just because like if a team doesn't like a quarterback, they're going to move on. So yeah, maybe it buys Jalen Hurts another year to give Jalen Hurts a chance to, prove himself as a starting quarterback. But we already know the Eagles were trying to get Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson. So in their heads, they're going to be looking for an upgrade, whether Deshaun Watson says I'll go there or not. So I don't want to say it's prolonging the inevitable because I don't want to be unfair to Jalen. He has a chance to grab this thing by the horns this year if he has a better year than last year. But I think, Deshaun should know that, and probably does know that in this business, the team will make that decision, and if they want to move on, they'll move on.
And part of the reason why I wanted to ask you is because, the way it played out with Watson ending up in Cleveland and like how there was 6 and then there was 3 and then Cleveland wasn't involved. And then according to The Athletic, Cleveland doubled down on the money, and they said, and then apparently Atlanta got mad that they weren't allowed to offer a counteroffer. And like the whole thing sounds like it was just a weird situation. Like I think people forget that in the middle of all this, Watson got to decide where he wanted to go. Like he had a no trade clause. So, I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people who still are under this impression that, the Eagles missed out on Watson. And it's like, well, no.
There's nothing they could do about it.
Right. Watson didn't put them in the running at all.
Yeah. No, listen, the Eagles wanted to be there. Trust me. I know they wanted to be at that table, but they couldn't be because Deshaun Watson didn't want them there. And as you're saying, if a guy's got a no trade clause and he rules you out from the start, then there's not much you can do about it. Now, it invites a bigger conversation that we've started talking about even about a week or two ago on Inside the Birds. When one person doesn't want to come to your franchise, right, you can say, all right, well, he's just wired differently. Maybe he just prefers it. When Russell Wilson wanted to stay on the West Coast, you say, all right, the guy wanted to stay on I should say West, not West Coast.
Right.
Because there's nothing about Denver that reeks of coastal town. But he wanted to stay out West. Okay. Deshaun Watson has these teams. He doesn't want to come to Philadelphia. Not quite sure why. Then you find out that, okay. Byron Jones was offered a ton of money by the Eagles 2 years ago, which, by the way, wound up in their favor that they didn't get him.
Right.
Because they went and got Darius Slay, who's better. But Byron Jones said, no, I'm going to take Miami. It was a comparable offer. Obviously, there's no state income tax in Miami or Florida. That helps, okay? Marcus Williams, I reported that they were close, that the deal was, you can split hairs there between the Ravens and the Eagles. Marcus Williams said, I'd rather go play for the Ravens. So now you've got more than 2 guys, more than 3 guys. And then I think I saw a report that Robert Woods was basically, because he was only getting a 6th-round pick in exchange, there were 3 teams interested, including the Eagles, and they basically said, all right, Rob, wherever you want to go, we'll send you. We're getting the same compensation, doesn't matter. And he chose the Titans.
Right.
So you do wonder, like, have the Eagles, because Josh, when I started covering the team in 2005, in the middle of the Andy Reid era, like, there was a burning desire for people to want to come play for the Eagles. Yes, it was always going to be about the money. They couldn't get anybody in the cheap.
But it was a destination.
But it was a destination, right? Nnamdi came here to play for Andy Reid. It didn't work out, but that's why he came here. The money was also there, but the market had settled at that point. People thought he was going to be going for a lot more somewhere else, and that just didn't work out, so the Eagles were able to swoop in. Asante Samuel was probably the number 1 free agent, not number 1 corner, but like overall free agent that year, I think, was Asante Samuel. He came here to play for Andy. And now you're starting to see, even just 5 years removed from a Super Bowl, that the list of people who, for whatever reason, it's not like the Eagles, I think, have a bad reputation. I just think that for some reason now there's not that really cool burning desire to go play for the franchise because maybe the head coach hasn't been there for a long time and neither has the quarterback. So there's not this stability that teams kind of look for and want.
Well, it's interesting also because you say that, and it was just, we're only a few years removed from, we just talked about earlier, Chris Long came here in free agency, like Garrett Blunt came here. Is there something to be said for the fact that you mentioned Andy Reid earlier? Doug Peterson was here previously. Is part of the problem that, I'm going to say this a little tongue-in-cheek, but Laurie didn't want Doug anymore. He wanted Sirianni, and now they're suffering the side effects of that.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure in Jeffrey Lurie's mind, it's not like he didn't know the optics were going to look bad of firing your coach a couple of years after a Super Bowl and then having to ship off your quarterback and the headlines and the big market. But he felt that in Nick Sirianni, he was going to get a new guy to kind of lead the franchise and be a better face and develop players. And in fairness, we're just in year 2, and he did win 9 games in year 1. But, the unintended consequence, as sometimes we talk about, is that through your instability, you may have players now that look at you and say, I'm just not comfortable. I don't know what's going on there, Again, I don't think it's that the Eagles have I don't think they're like the old Jets or what the Browns used to be. I'm not trying to insinuate that. I'm just saying it used to be like, I want to go play for the Eagles when I was on the beat early. And it's not like that right now. It can get that way again. It's just not right now. And it's weird because it's just it's removed from just a few years removed from their first and only Super Bowl. They had more success without a Super Bowl because they had a head coach and a quarterback who were here and winning divisions and going to the conference championship. And they had a long-standing record of stability where the Eagles have kind of been up and down for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years now.
At Geoff Mosher NFL on Twitter, InsideTheBirds.com, and the Inside the Birds podcast show on Monday's edition of Football at 4. Jeff, real quick before I let you go, I want to get your thought on a couple of the other NFL stories. Matt Ryan going to Indy and the Falcons basically telling the Eagles, hey, we're going to kill you on that record of dead money. I mean, the $7 million more dollars. I mean, did Atlanta just hate Matt Ryan? Like, it's such a strange thing just to be like, and they just signed Marcus Mariota to a 2-year contract. Like, Arthur Smith didn't wait. Like, he got the divorce and found a new girlfriend in hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's the amazing thing is that Matt Ryan was on the team last year, right? You have a new coach, new GM, and yet the quarterback stayed. So you had to know Matt Ryan was on borrowed time. Honestly, I think they're doing right by Matt. And I'm sure Matt's not upset by it because now he goes to a team that is built to contend, and he'll get another chance to see if he can get that elusive Super Bowl ring. You know, he's been there, he just hasn't won it. And I still think he's a pretty good quarterback, and I actually think he had a pretty good year last year when you consider the fact that he lost Calvin Ridley halfway through the year. Julio Jones was gone. I mean, his best weapon at some point were either a rookie in Kyle Pitts or a journeyman in Cordarrelle Patterson. And it's not like his offensive line's great either. And he had a really rough first week against the Eagles, and everybody thought that team was headed toward like a 3-win season. And they still managed to win, I think, 7 games. So good job by him in the long scheme, and then by Arthur Smith. But Arthur obviously has familiarity with Marcus from their days in Tennessee. And I would imagine that Marcus is a bridge. They'll probably look to draft a quarterback. And they're going to start over, just like kind of the Eagles had to do a little bit last year and take that massive dead cap hit.
So what you're really saying...
That also shows you how fungible the cap is. The cap means nothing
true,
anymore, right? You know, I mean, nothing.
Well, I was going to say is that, so does that mean that Josh Rosen, just forget about him? Because he was still on the roster too.
Good backup to have.
Good backup to have. Gotcha. The other thing is that, you know, Matt Ryan, look, he's got a resume, but he's much older than Jimmy G and Baker Mayfield. Both of those guys, we've been all expecting Jimmy G to be traded for months. Baker now is going to be traded at some point by the Browns. Jameis just re-signed with New Orleans. Atlanta just brought in Marcus Mariota. Like, man, you got 2 quarterbacks who are not old, and it's like, does anybody want them?
Well, I mean, you got 2 quarterbacks, and you got 2 teams that need quarterbacks, right? I mean, you've got Seattle that still needs a quarterback. Excuse me. And you have Cleveland. Now, Cleveland obviously isn't going to bring Baker. Not Cleveland. I'm sorry. I guess Houston, unless Houston's really married to David Mills. So maybe it's now just down to one team that needs a quarterback, and that's Seattle. So they can sit there and leverage Baker Mayfield versus Jimmy Garoppolo against each other. And then whoever loses out, it's like, wow, where do I go now, right? I'm sure somebody will find a home and a chance to compete.
It just feels so weird, man. Like,
but don't you feel like the Colts out of this are the Colts are like the Eagles of last year? I mean, they got rid of Carson. They got a 3rd round. They got 2 3rd-round picks. They just gave up only a 3rd-round pick to get Matt Ryan. And I feel like that they are a better team now because they have Matt Ryan and they have a very good offensive line, good defense.
But Jeff, it's been Luck, Brissett, Rivers, Wentz,
every year.
Ryan, and like even Darius Leonard's on Twitter basically like ripping his own team, like poking fun at him. He's like, "Hey man, but I have another quarterback next year." You know, like,
I know.
I mean, even the players are sitting there like at some point, like, you know, we all talk about like, you know, we talk about GMs, right? You know, it's Chris Ballard's one of the 5-10 best in the league, right? Jim Irsay, you know, he's not a sheepish owner. He's not scared to make moves, but it's like, this is a weird situation. The franchise that went from Manning to Luck, now they got a new quarterback every year.
Well, that's why I definitely think they need to use Matt Ryan as a bridge, get a quarterback. And same thing with who else? I mean, Atlanta, obviously. I mean, I think there'll be some, you know, the Saints should be probably thinking of Jameis Winston as a bridge. So I think a lot of these short-term quarterback deals, and then, of course, whoever Seattle decides to go with, they'll probably view as a bridge too. So it's funny because it's not a great quarterback draft, but you're going to see some pretty decent teams that all of a sudden don't have quarterbacks, probably hunting to get back into the first round, you know, late first round, or getting up in the early second round to grab some quarterbacks.
And we know those quarterbacks always get overdrafted. We know.
Yeah, and don't forget about the Steelers, because Mitchell Trubisky should also be viewed as a bridge.
Now, Jeff, he wants to be called Mitch now. Get it right.
Oh, is it? Jeez. All right, Mitch Trubisky.
Apparently, he wants to be called Mitch now, not Mitchell anymore.
Gotcha. All right.
I don't know what that means in the grand scheme of things, but that's apparently what he said at the press conference. So, cool, man. Enjoy the name change, I think.
What's the Mount Rushmore of Mitches in sports? We've got Mitch Williams, a little dear to us. Mitch Richmond.
Former
2-guard, right?
Well, that was the first one I thought was Mitch Richmond. So
yeah. I don't know if Mitch Trubisky belongs on a Mount Rushmore yet, though.
Well, the problem is there's not a lot. I mean, you just named the 2 first ones that would have come to my mind.
Mitch Morse is a very good center, by the way. He's the Bills center. He's probably the 2nd or 3rd best center. Or is it Mitch Morse or Mike? No, it's Mitch Morse, right?
Yeah, it's Mitch Morse.
Yeah. He's a dark horse candidate there.
He's a solid contender.
There's probably more baseball players named Mitch. I just can't think of them right now.
I mean, I remember there was Michael Morris who played baseball, not Mitch Morris. Now that you say Morris.
No. Mitch Morris is the center for
I
the
remember
Buffalo
years
Bills.
ago when Philly fans wanted the Phillies to trade for Michael Morris because he could play every outfield position.
That's right.
You know, that was a thing at one point.
How about Mitch Haniger? He's a very good baseball player for the Seattle Mariners, right? He might have to be up there.
Now, is he better than Mitch Morris, though?
I mean, there's room for both. One's a football player, one's a baseball player. I mean, we can get Trubisky out of there until he earns it.
It's really a shame we can't think of a Mitch hockey player.
No, but Mitch Williams has to be there, right?
Well,
I mean, he's got
Mitch Williams and Mitch Richmond are like shoo-ins.
Personality alone.
They're locks.
You got to have Mitch Williams there. Got to have Mitchie Poo.
I mean, Mitch Richmond was probably one of the best shooting guards to never do anything in his career aside from shoot.
Yeah, well, he might be the most talented overall Mitch in sports, right? I mean, he's the MVP of Mitches, I would think.
The MVP.
Not counting Kevin Mitchell. We're not going to do that. You got to be a first name Mitch.
Yeah, let's not confuse. No inverting of the names here. You got to have some rules, right?
That's right.
He's Geoff Mosher. You can follow him on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. All the coverage of the Eagles over at InsideTheBirds.com. And, of course, the latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast dropped this morning. Geoff, appreciate you jumping on today, and we'll talk soon.
All right, my friend. Have a great one.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Yell here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app.